Hello. Hello, everyone. Class is filling up, I see. It is almost the top of the hour, but I will preface today. I think I'm starting to go downhill. About 85%, but I think I caught cooties from my son because, of course, it's the start of a new school year and those germs are lurking around every single corner. And I think he may have given me one of his cooties that I didn't ask for. So if my energy doesn't seem as high today as it usually is in previous classes, that is why I have definitely probably overdosed on like vitamin C and echinacea, trying to get ahead of whatever this is before I completely flatline. But just wanted to share that if you observe that my energy is lower than usual, it is probably because my immune system has weakened since the last time that we've talked. And speaking of the last time that we've talked, my Wi-Fi just completely went out. Apparently, there was a service issue in my area that I was not made aware of, thanks Google Fiber. Hopefully, we should not have any disruptions with tonight's class. And I did send out an email, a very much apologetic one, and trying to see the silver lining in all of this is that we were actually done with the lesson. I just didn't get to tell everyone good night or see you later or anything like that. So thank you all if you stayed on just a few minutes later to see if I was going to be able to get back in. I was not able to get back in, and I was like, oh my gosh, Elena, you need a contingency plan. We talk about that in our 16 weeks, is like having those contingency plans available. And I was like, well, what do I do next? So I have a hotspot set up. I did not have the link on my phone because I was like, I'll just join by my phone and finish out the lesson that way. But I did not even have the Zoom link on my phone. So that was a whole situation. So again, hopefully we don't run into those issues in the future, but just letting you all know, I am here till page 48 with you all tonight, but um, like I said, I think I might even actually, I know I'm probably going to just head straight to bed after this. So let's get into it, shall we? So we are talking about job evaluation methods. Um, and I want to just say it's my allergies. That's what I really want to just lean on. But I am fearful that if I stay with it's just my allergies, that it will turn into something else because I was in denial. Thank you, Jasmine. You know what? Um speaking of like green tea, honey, and ginger, oh my gosh, what is it? A medicine ball. I have the ingredients to make a medicine ball. You know what? I think that's what I'm gonna do. In the shot of whiskey on it. Right after class. That's exactly what I'm gonna do. um, yeah, thank you, Alexandra. The technology, internet issues, you just never know when to expect them. I was like, can you give me a heads up, Google? Like I have my phone right here. Well, I thought we were friends, but clearly not. But nonetheless, we get to talk a little bit more about money today. So that's exciting. So let me get ourselves into presentation mode. All right. I think we are rolling now. So our learning objectives is to define the wage structure decision and then evaluate the four methods of a job evaluation. So now, you remember when we were talking about job analysis in Unit 2 and how, remember that slide that popped up? And I was like, just so we know that job analysis is analyzing the job. And we had that split screen kind of going on there, and it had job evaluation. And I said we were going to get to that, right? And so here we are. Now we actually get to evaluate the job. We get to give the job money. Where previously in Unit 2, we were just really writing down or observing exactly what the person or persons were doing in that particular role. All right, so the wage structure decision. So if you recall from not last night, but Monday night, that wage structure decision is those similar jobs or those relative jobs, right? So now we are drawing comparisons between people, I wouldn't say people, but jobs within the organization as it relates to their job title, administrative assistant to secretary. So not, apples to apples, but definitely, apples and oranges because they're both fruits. So very similar. Okay, so with that being said, so we know that all jobs, within an organization are not worth the same rate of pay. That's why we have pay scales. That's why we have job grades. That's why we have, a variation in compensation that we give to our employees, right? So, I mean, maybe in some environments, maybe union even, you may see someone that comes in, or maybe everyone comes in at an entry level position and they're all assigned the same wage until they get to move up to a different wage. Also, the stair step model, you may see where, again, everyone may come in at that base rate, and depending upon how quickly they get up to speed and how efficient they are, will determine their next rate of pay. So it's not going to be too often that you see in organizations where everyone is being paid the same. And even with some of these, I would say, union environments, well, maybe your entry level people are being paid the same, but your managers aren't. Or any of the other leaders in the organization, they're not being paid the same. So we have to have some sort of pay scale, and that helps us define, well, if we have an open position, or if we want to create a new position, well, what and how are we going to assign a monetary amount to those specific jobs? So that is what we're going to be talking about, and all we're going to be talking about in this particular section. When it comes to job evaluation in your exam is going to apply one of four, and I'll say one of 4.1 because factor comparison and the Hay method is kind of like a subset to factor comparison, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But they're going to really be talking about one of four of these if it shows its face on the exam. Now, on a sticky note, if you are not anywhere near a sticky note or a highlighter, of course, you can come back to this recording and catch this. But the easiest way to think of these four methods here is grouping them. So the first two that we're going to talk about this evening are ranking and then the classification grading. Those are going to be your non-analytical. So when we say non-analytical, right, we're talking about, there's really no method to the madness. There's nothing probably, well documented. There's no science behind it. Like there really isn't a lot of thought put into it. Like there's a little bit, but not a well, full roll out, ironed out plan. And we like those. And sometimes in different types of organizations, maybe ranking or classification may work because there's not a whole lot to do with it. So those are going to be our non-analytical ones. Our points and our factor comparison, those are going to be our analytical ones. So those are going to be more robust, more in depth. They're probably going to have some compliance backing to it. There's going to be a little bit more science and regulation, right, to some of these two analytical ones that we're going to talk about. So again, keep that in your mind. That's probably the best way to recall. If you do need to recall, it's like, oh, what are we talking about? Ranking or classification? Well, I know there's not, a method to this truly. where again, points and factor comparison, those are going to be, like I said, more science, more analytical base. Come on now. There we go. Okay, so the first one is our ranking method. And so, like I said, not a whole lot going on here. It probably works. I would say a ranking method probably is going to work better for like a small organization. It's definitely not going to be used in a I would say mid to large size organization. So again, keep that in mind. It may become useful when you go to take your exam. But a job ranking method is very straightforward. It just simply compares jobs to other jobs in the organization. And the ranking is, you probably guessed it, the importance within the organization. So here, jobs are compared directly to one another without really, again, using any specific criteria or really any factors at all, right? So you're probably going to start at the top of the stack, and who you're going to put there? Well, I imagine you probably place the CEO or the president at the top of the pile. And you're just going to work your way down below. So, after you get the CEO or the president at the top of that stack, well, probably who are you going to put next? Your senior managers, right? And then maybe just your maybe line managers or your managers. And then you're going to put probably the individual contributors underneath there, and thinking just about whatever type of industry you're in, admins or buyers or engineers or again, whoever, again, retail associates, whoever you have in your organization, you're just going to rank them in a pile of sorts. So again, no true criteria. It's very simplistic, right? Like I said, it's not going to take a lot of brain power to do the ranking. Now, when you think about ranking, you're like, well, that doesn't really sound like a bad idea. Like, I think, this is the most simplistic way to do things, especially if you're in a small organization. You're like, why not? Well, if you aren't working alone, well, there could be some subjectivity to it, right? So we talk about experts, remember the Delphi technique. So we like expert opinions, and we probably don't want to do this all on our own. And so you're trying to get buy-in. Well, what happens when you're trying to get buy-in or really influence really who should come after the managers? Like, what role should you place after you have your managers and your presidents all situated? So that could, impose conflict or just some differences of opinion as to what role should come next. So you might run into that. And then, of course, there's not going to be any analysis of the job that's going to come into play here. So some of the other, or the actually two other ranking methods that we're going to talk about today, or job evaluation methods, I apologize, that we're going to talk about today are going to use criteria. So they're not, again, the ranking method does not lean itself to that. So just remember that as it comes, as your exam may bring up anything that is related to the ranking method. Like, it may be the simplest to roll out in a small organization, but it still might not yield the results that you're looking for, especially if you're not working by yourself. All right, so this next one here is our classification or our grading method. And you know what? This one isn't too bad. It still lacks, I would say, the um, detail or the breadth of really putting jobs into categories. Now, the classification method here, just this does involve grouping jobs into those predefined categories or grades or levels, and they're going to be based off of just some overall characteristics. So, you're going to group again by certain characteristics. So, you're probably going to group by skill level, responsibility, complexity of the role, things of that nature. So, again, you're going to have your president at the top. That's easy peasy. But now you may group all of your managers, where in the ranking method, you're going to have your senior managers, and then you're going to probably have their job title and where they work within the organization in their function. So you may have a senior manager in HR, you have a senior manager in, I don't know, procurement, right? So now with ranking, now you have to decide on, does the procurement, senior manager job role is as, according to skill or responsibility or complexity, who gets to go first? Is it the procurement senior manager? Or is it the HR senior manager? So again, battle of the titles, where in the classification method, you're just simply going to group them all together. Like, you don't really care. They're senior managers. They're going in a senior manager category. Your managers, again, they're going to be grouped in the manager category. All of your administrative assistants, they're going to be in maybe the assistant category, or whatever category that the industry prefers. So again, with classification or the grading method, you're going to have the grouping by the characteristics. Now, with the classification, unlike the job ranking, in a small organization, let's say you have, I don't know, 50 employees or so. And so you're going to have 50, I would say, job grades. You're going to have one for each job because, again, you have a senior manager in procurement and you have a senior manager in HR, and those two have two totally different job grades. With the classification methods, you're going to have a predefined grade based off of the category. So let's say you have, again, small business, you have 50 people there, 50 job titles, but now you can break them out into your president as one. Maybe you have 10 senior managers, you have 10 managers, and then you have, 10 administrative assistants and so forth and so on. So maybe at the end of all of this categorizing, well, now you only have 7 job grades for the 50 employees that you have within this small employer. Now, of course, as the organization grows, you may, add on to job grades and things of that nature. Right now, my current employer, where I work at Grant Thornton, we just actually went to a classification method where we have 33 job grades, and that is in totality of, gosh, I want to say we have in excess of 10,000 employees. So we have 10,000 employees with 33 job grades. So that is how that would work. Instead of having 33,000 job titles, or not 33, but 10,000 job titles, you just now have 33. So it definitely makes job selection easier when it comes to creating new hire profiles. Here with the classification, it is more simplistic, right? You have that simplified comparison because, again, you're moving from 50 job titles to, maybe 5, 7, whatever that looks like. You can apply a little bit more consistency and fairness to it now. So now you're not necessarily fighting over the senior manager in procurement versus the senior HR manager and what their salary difference looks like. You can apply just a more consistency and fairness across the board. And yeah, and as, like I said, the business grows from the ranking method to this classification method, then it's probably going to make more sense for the classification and the grading method here for those mid-size and large organizations. So we start off, like I said, maybe it's easier to do because you don't have a lot of employees with ranking. But again, as that business grows, you probably want to move to something just a little bit more sophisticated, which would lead your way to the classification or grading method. Now, if we want to apply some reasoning, before um, we move along here. Oh, yes, I forgot about this knowledge check. So the book does talk about the GS system that is used by the federal government that I did not share with you all. So let's I'm gonna have you all take a guess. And maybe if you are a federal employee, you may know the true answer to this. But the GS system used by our federal government is an example of which job evaluation method. And you know what? If you are a federal employee or if you have ever applied to become a federal employee, you probably know exactly what the answer is. Yeah. Veronica, you're going with the consensus of the group. Yeah, absolutely. And so D here is the correct answer. It is that classification system. And so, yep. So just like I said, I forget what they go up to. I feel like I'm passive forgetting because I used to know as a federal contract employee myself, but I can't remember what grade they actually go up to. But yes. Oh, thank you, Tiffany. Yes, 15. So as you can see, they use the classification system and it's it works, right? So now they know that their highest grade is 15 and you work yourself backwards from there. So great job though, without actually going in and giving any content about the GS system in the federal government and how that operates. But yes, well done. Let's advance forward and talk now about the point method. So the point method, as well as the factor comparison methods, are going to, like I said, be more analytical. As you can see just by the slide, there are steps you need to take, right? There is a full plan, a process in place that you did not see on the previous two slides, or the previous slides, I should say. So the point method, the key takeaway here for the point methods and the factor comparison method is that they do look at the detailed analysis of a job to draw comparison. Now, one of the things with the point method is to identify key jobs. And I'm going to talk about these in tandem. So you're going to identify key jobs with the point method and the factor comparison method. And we're going to talk about what the similarities are and then what are some differences, because there are some key differences between the two. If for your exam, it's really going to come down to the wording. So please pay attention to the wording in any type of questions that would pop up on your exam. Point method, we're literally talking about points. Like you're giving the little hash marks when it comes to points. And the factor comparison is you're assigning a monetary amount. So with that being said, we're going to identify key jobs for both in the organization. And you're probably wondering, like, well, what the heck is a key job? Not every position in the company is considered a key job. These are key jobs are the roles that are consistent. So I'm gonna just talk about the administrative assistant role. So that role typically is consistent. You don't see a lot of like layoffs or and I shouldn't say layoffs, but like RIFs. So any reduction in force is where companies are just eliminating administrative assistants or administrative assistant roles within an organization. So key jobs, again, are going to be those consistent positions that are represented just in various levels of responsibilities within the organization, right? So you could have an admin one, an admin two, a senior admin. Again, the consistency in availability of the position would make it a key job. Um, Also, with the point method, as you can see here, you're going to identify job factors used to determine pay levels. So you're looking at compensable factors here. So these are where those jobs are going to be determined to help determine pay levels. And we're looking at skills, responsibilities, efforts, work conditions, things of that nature to help us delineate one role from the other, right? So again, literally giving um, points, the little hashes, right? And then you get to the 5 or the 4, and you get the diagonal 5 across. You're literally giving points to a job or jobs based off of this criteria. So number 3 says you're weighting the factors, right, according to their contribution to the overall worth, which we just talked about. So again, responsibilities, that effort, working conditions, um, responsibility is another one that you would look at as a piece of criteria as well. Um, Divide each factor into degrees that range from high to low. We're assigning points to each one of those. We are looking at the job descriptions to reach that consensus about those degree assignments. That's where we're actually pulling the details of the job from. Right, because we wouldn't know that otherwise. So we physically have to analyze the job in order to be able to assign points or weight to specific roles within the organization. And then lastly, number 6 here on this slide is this is where we start the creation or the development of a wage curve using these key jobs. So this is how we're able to now, again, assign a dollar amount for the employees within our business. Key jobs, you're going to at least list about 12 to 20. So as you can see, probably right out the gate, this is going to be more used, the point method, probably in a mid to large size organization as well. Now, with that being said, okay, I was like, I thought I had a slide in here that talks about the point methods. Here is your wage curve. So again, this is when we really start honing in on one, when we look at our budget, what can we afford? Are we paying at industry standards? Are we paying above or below industry standards? Because that's going to come into play when we're talking about our wage curve. Now, I'm going to come back to this slide here, and we're going to talk about our point assignment. This is also Exhibit 10 in your book. And like I said, we're looking at those compensable factors, right? Skill, responsibility, efforts, work conditions here. And then we have that weighted percentage of what job are we talking about? The regrind operator for this example. So as you can see, we have some varying points, right? On the right-hand side here, we have for skill, we're giving, it a 20 or a 32, 48, 72, and then it rounds out here at 100 responsibility, same, or the points across the board here. 10, I'm sorry, for effort, you have your scoring rubric here. Working conditions would be the same as well. So this is your scoring rubric that is up here that you are going to use when it comes time to talk about the regrind operator or any other role that you would need to assign points to. So for skill, we're saying that this degree is in the middle. So this person, or this job, I should say, not person, is assigned a 3, which we know is going to give this job 48 points. You would do that for every compensable factor listed. You're going to total out the score. And then what you're going to do is you're going to begin to plot your wage curve. So as you can see, that total was 126. So we have our 100 points here, and then we would notch it. We would probably have some additional slashes here just kind of indicate where that 126 would fall in here. But I imagine, right, it's probably a little bit below the midpoint line. I'd say the midpoint was probably at 150, right, halfway through. So probably, right around here. And then again, that is how we would get the dollar amount that we are going to be paying for a regrind operator. Now, with that being said, we also have our factor comparison method. So the factor comparison method is a systematic and detailed approach to a job evaluation, much like our point methods. As you can see here, like I said, both of the point methods and the factor comparison, both have to identify those key jobs as well. So we know what those are, those consistent jobs within the organization. And then we're going to identify job factors. So fact excuse me, those jobs here are evaluated based on those predefined factors. And again, we're talking about skill, right? Responsibility, effort, work conditions. But the difference here, we're not assigning points, we're actually assigning a dollar amount, which is important. Here also with the factor comparison method is then we begin to rank them. So here each benchmark or key job is ranked against each factor, independent of each other. So we'll look at an example that is also in your book as well. And then again, we will assign monetary amounts to each job. And then we'll look at unique jobs here as well, because that can sometimes have I would say probably some ambiguity in how we are assigning dollar amounts to specific jobs within the organization. So you could have some unique jobs within organizations or within industries that maybe they don't fit into any particular category per se. Oh, I thought maybe I don't have a screenshot or a slide for my factor comparison method, but there is one in your book on Exhibit 13. So it does talk about the factor comparison method using student jobs in a university library. So if you have your book with you, Exhibit 13 does call out several different jobs. So we have the reference librarian, the circulation desk, the sorter and shelvers, the janitor, and then we also have the copy center. And if you see down at the bottom, there are dollar amounts assigned, right? So let's take the reference librarian for example. So the reference librarian has $4 plus $1.50 plus another $4 plus another $4 plus 20 cents. And then that's how we get to that wage of $13.70 an hour. Now, the table above is actually how we are plucking those dollar amounts and assigning them to the reference library. So we think about, again, just some of the compensable factors. And here we have listed mental demands, the physical demands, skill, responsibility, and working conditions, right? Uh-oh. Let me see. Oh my gosh, they have. Okay. I just realized. Oh, oh yes. Okay. So I just realized that I had the 2023 book open. Yes. Okay. Now I have the 2024. So my apologies. So the reference librarian, $8, $3, $8, 40 cents for a total of $27.40. We have to get inflation in there to compensate our reference librarian. Thanks for the call out there. So when we go up to the table in Exhibit 13, you can see for the reference librarian, the mental demands was assigned a total of $8. And then if you look at the physical demands, and at the table, you'll have to come down a little bit because it doesn't flow just left to right. But for the reference librarian, for physical demands, Is $3. And remember, we're always referring back to the job description. So when we're looking at the job description, we're saying, okay, so the mental demands for a reference librarian is high, but the physical demands for a reference library is not so high. It's much lower. For the skill for a reference librarian, again, I'm not sure what the responsibilities are, but the skill looks like it's very high. So we are assigning $8. The responsibility also for a reference librarian is high. So another $8 was assigned. And then the working conditions is low. So that is where they have tallied up the addition or the 40 cents there, again, to get us a total of $27.40. Oh my gosh, I thought I had the most current version. So a good thing it doesn't divvy too much. But as you can see there, again, how we have the compensable factors and how they differ from the point system. Now, with the factor, I know, Tiffany, I am. If I can blame the cooties, I will definitely blame it on the cooties. The similarities with both are the key jobs, right? The compensable factors would be another one when we're talking about the skills, again, the responsibilities, the effort, the working conditions. Those you're going to both see with the factor comparison as well as the point methods. And then the objective evaluation, right? With the analytical points and factor, there is some sort of systematic approach where we don't see that in the classified in the ranking methods. So you're going to see both of those in the analytical. Now, what are the differences? And I think that is what you all will want to hone in on when you study the two of these. So again, point method, you're assigning points. Factor method, you're assigning dollar amounts. That's the easy takeaway. So that is, and then with the, and I would say probably that is probably the key difference between the factor and the point method is one is assigning points, the other one is signing the monetary amount, that dollar amount. Now, I say factor was our fourth one, but we have a subset of the factor comparison method, which is our Hay method, or you may also see it called the guide chart profile method. So with the Hay method, there are compensable factors, the three main factors that you see here on the slide, and that is how when you go to do a job evaluation, if you're using the Hay method, this is how you will perform those actions. So you're going to look at know-how, problem solving, and accountability, right? So the know-how are those knowledge, skills, and experience to do the job. Problem solving comes into play when we're talking about complexity, creativity, things of that nature. And then, of course, accountability is the same as responsibility when we think about the factor comparison method or even the point methods. Now, with the Hay method, you're also going to be assigning a dollar amount as well. One of the key differences I would say with the Hay method is that they do use these three compensable factors in that, really they are very similar to the factor comparison method. But what the Hay method does here is that they begin to, I would say, profile match. So now we're looking at the know-how, the problem solving, and the accountability. Excuse me. And then they are matched to profiles based on the scoring of these three factors here. So there's going to be a scoring, kind of like the point method, but then there's also going to be a dollar amount assigned, like the factor comparison method. So it does sit within, or I should say it is a subset of the factor comparison method only because there is that monetary amount that is assigned to it. All right, so before we move into our next section, when using the point method, key jobs refers to what? All right, you all are on it tonight. So that is true. So C is the correct answer when we are talking about key jobs, right? So those are going to be those equitably paid jobs that are fairly well defined, has some sort of, hierarchy. Again, we're talking about admin one, two, senior, whatever that looks like. And are consistent within the organization. So those are the ones that you would want to rely on when using the point methods or the factor comparison method. All right, let's get into our next section. And we are going to, I didn't stay on that page too long, but we are going to talk about the job pricing and pay rate administration. So in this section, we get to talk about understanding what worth and value in the job mean. We'll relate the wage curve to job bands. We'll take a look at red circle rates and what does that mean. And then lastly, identify economic implications and pay rate determinants in the compensation strategy and job pricing, which is always fun. That's when we get into some of these equity conversations within compensation in the business. All right, so job pricing, pricing the job, we could probably infer if we saw that on the exam exactly what they were talking about. It means that we are talking about the worth of the job or the value of the job or the incumbent that will be performing this job, the skills, the responsibility, the experience, the education, all of that it is going to be wrapped up and how we assign a dollar amount to, again, specific jobs within our organization. So here we're talking about pay ranges, pay grades, the salaries curve, all of that we're going to be talking about in this section here. All right, and as promised, like I said, we're going to be talking about salary curves, pay grades, wage curves. A lot of these terms are used interchangeably, but mean the same thing. So in your book, you will also see this exhibit. This is exhibit 14. And as you can see, it does look kind of familiar to what we just saw in the last section. Now, this, I would say, this graphic here has a lot more going on than the previous slide that we saw that just had the trend line or the midpoint is what some may hear it called as well. Neither is incorrect. It could be the trend line, the midpoint line, the industry paid line. You may again hear it called several different terms, but they all mean the same thing. Now, with this, as we are looking at this illustration, as you can see, we are talking in terms of hourly wages. We have our labor job grades down here at the bottom. So we have a total of 8. We are looking at this from a point perspective. We have our min range here. So this is the minimum that we would be able to bring any person in as it relates to these job grades. Again, we have our trend line, we have our midpoint where someone with some experience, we probably can flex above or below the line up to about 20% if we wanted to here. We try to stay as close to this trend line as much as we possibly can. The reason for that is that we always want to give someone an opportunity to grow, right? Because if we bring them in at the top of the range, well, we talk about retention, we talk about job satisfaction, we talk about development and growth. But if you're bringing someone at the top of their range, They're very limited on where they can go, especially if that's how they are coming into the organization, knowing that they're not going to be promoted for at least a couple of years or so. So, again, as a rule of thumb, we flex in this area at the trend line between 10 and 20%. We have our maximum line. Again, we typically don't want to bring in someone at the max line. You really don't want for any of your employees to max out either. Again, some of those issues of concern could be brought up again, where we could see job boredom. We could see, misconduct taking place because they're bored within their job. Kind of what we talked about earlier, where they've hit a plateau. And if they are at the max, they're probably not getting merit increases any longer because we have not adjusted the wage survey or not the wage survey, but the wage curve, unfortunately. And so then that is where you get to this red circle rate. So sometimes what happens and what causes and can create equity issues within an organization is when we do have one or more employees that are sitting outside of their job range. So we have someone in this labor grade 3. Maybe we brought them in at a very high rate of pay, right? And we're like, you know what? We really need them here in a 3. Maybe we were looking for someone to fill this space. Maybe this rec had been open for a long time, and we're like, gosh, we really need to get this filled. The person that you brought in was probably already too experienced for the role to begin with. We probably should have brought this person in, at a level 4 or a labor grade 4. We just didn't have the head count in labor grade 4, but we absolutely didn't want to not offer this person a role at our company. So what happens there, right? So they get here. They've been at the company for a few years. They get their merit increases. And of course, they start bumping up against that max line. Well, now they've been here for a couple of years or so. They're still not ready to get into this labor grade 4 just yet. And so what happens is we give them another merit increase. Well, now what happens is that now they sit outside of their pay range. So now again, what happens here is it creates inequity within the this employee group here. So when you would go to pull your employee grouping to make the next offer for someone that wants to come and work for you, now you have this person here, and you have, probably some people here and some people in this gray space. Well, where do you put this next person? Do you put them in the gray space? Do you put them at the trend line? Do you put them above the trend line? Do you put them closer to the max? What do you do with them? So that's really how that conversation of inequities really starts to highlight itself in an organization. So a red circle rate is definitely something that is difficult to course correct. Now, what you would see down here at the bottom on the flip side of this are some green circle rates. And so here, if someone is sitting in this space, well, it's probably easier to bring them up to speed. So what happens here is that, every year we do a salary survey. The market tells us the comp trends, and we've made adjustments internally. But there might be a group of people that are sitting here that we did not adjust. Our comp team did not adjust these people's compensation for whatever reason. So, who finds it? Well, someone brings it to our attention that, hey, such and such said that they were getting paid this much. And I know we started around the same time and we have the same amount of experience. So what do? You start to investigate. You're like, oh, yeah, we have about 5 people that are sitting beneath our pay range. So you bump them up. So they get a nice, big increase in their pay. Now they are sitting amongst their peers where they should be. These rates are easier to course correct than these rates here. because here you'd have to take away some pay, or you'd have to bump them up to the next pay range, where again, as a employer, you may not have the budget for that. Um, or you may not have the position. So there's a lot of things that you have to take into account when we are looking at our wage curve. This slide here just kind of speaks to what I was sharing on the previous slide when we're talking about pay ranges, and again, that trend line or the midpoint within your comp range. So we look, like I said, you typically flex between 10 and 20%, right? You don't want to, well, I say you don't want to, you can go higher, but that usually results in higher approval as well. So every organization is a little bit different. But typically when you go to make an offer and it is outside of the 10 to 20% range, you're going to need to have higher approval to approve that, because again, what I just shared, just some of the cons there is that now we know that this person is coming in at a much higher pay, which they're probably going to hit their max much sooner than their peers in that same category. All right, so now your comp ratios. And comp ratios are, I know this probably looks like a very ugly formula to use, but it is not hard at all. So the book actually does a really good job at telling us what a comp ratio or how to complete a comp ratio. So the WR is the wage rate, if I can say that, wage rate divided by the midpoint times 100. So the example that is given us in our book is that someone is earning $9 per hour in a pay range with a midpoint of $8 per hour. So right then and there, you see in this word problem, you're getting the wage rate, right? So the book says earnings. So your exam may say earnings as well. This formula says wage rate. Just know again that those words are used synonymous with each other. So we have our $9 per hour in a pay range with a midpoint. We have our midpoint and it says it's $8. So that would give us a comp ratio of, if you do the math, you should get 112.5. And this is simply doing your $9 divided by $8 and times it by 100. Now, a pay range of, again, at plus or minus 20% would have a comp ratios between, again, that 80 and 120. That is how you know that you are in a good range. So if you are below 80, you may want to, I would say, challenge yourself as to the reason why this person is coming in so low in their pay range. Is it truly because they have no experience and they're coming in at the state or local wage rate, which a lot of people, or a lot of, I would say, employees do not do that. And then again, if you are bringing them in at more than 120%, you want to also challenge yourself, because again, that's where that gap to the max is going to be very slim. So it's not going to take them a ton of time to max out in their pay range. And we know that it's going to at least take, 2 to 3 years to get them as an expert in their field if someone does not have a ton of experience. So we definitely want to give them, plenty of room to grow within their salary range. So again, wage rate in midpoint, that's going to be given to you in your word problem if it should show its face again on the exam. And all you're going to do is just plug in the formula. It's a division problem, and then don't forget to times it by 100, because that is where you are going to get that percentage. Yes, Jasmine, just like that. So as you can see, that 112.5 is in the middle of 80 and 120. So you would be good to go. Now, in my days of creating offer letters, this would be great. I would not have to seek additional approval because it is within the range. Again, if it's below 80, you're probably going to need to seek approval because you're going to need to justify why this person is being brought in at such a low rate. And again, if they're above 120, you're going to need to justify and get approval as to the reason why you're bringing in someone at such a high rate within that pay salary group. Look at us. We'll all be able to create offers after this. Everybody will want to work in comp after this. So knowledge check. An employer uses a pay range primarily to what? All right. And are you all justifying your answer? So an employer uses a pay range primarily, and primarily is going to be your keyword here. So all of these could be right, but one of them should stand out more so than the other or others. All right, so let's break this one out. Let me see. I'm looking at the answers. I think I've seen every answer except for C. So pay employees according to their needs. We can all agree, that's not the reason why an employer primarily uses a pay range. Now, can you come in and ask what you need, right, to take care of your family? You should. You should. But that's not the primary reason why an employer has a pay range. But C could be a probable answer as well, but not the best one. And we're looking for the best one here. So some of you all said A, eliminate red circle rate. So that's really not the primary reason why an employer would use a pay range. When we develop the pay range, we really don't expect to have red circle rates. So we really don't want to expect to have to eliminate them. Now, when they do happen, we will have to take a course of action, right, to eliminate them. And that's either, maybe when's the last time have we done a salary survey? When, maybe we need to make some adjustments to our wage survey. Maybe we need to look at our budget to see if we can make adjustments to our wage survey. But red circle rates should not exist initially or at all, ever. When we're talking about wage survey. I keep saying wage surveys, the wage curve. So A, although it could happen, it's not the primary reason why an employer uses a pay range. Some of you all said D, I think. I may have saw some D's in the chat. So pay employees in proportion to their output. Well, when we have a pay range, right, we don't know what an employee, when we go to make an offer, what their proportion to their output is going to be, right? So we interview them, they do well, they have the great skill sets, they have a ton of experience, and we hire them based off of that. But we also hire them for the future, right? We hire them because we know that they're capable now. And by golly, we train and develop them, and lo and behold, of what they can be in the future. So while this is a good tool, right, the pay range is a good tool to determine an employee's proportion to their output, it's again not what we primarily use a pay range for, because D is a little bit ambiguous, right? Um, so B, as in boy, is the correct answer here. So we want to reward our employees for their overall performance and or their length of service. So we do, right? We have a pay range because that's the reason why we flex on an offer per se between that 10 and 20%. We want to be able to reward them within their pay group based off of their overall performance, that merit increase, and and their length of service. So the longer they stay with us, it's a retention tool. When you think about it, right? We know every year on our anniversary day, or maybe every year in January or another month of the year, we're going to get a 6-7% increase if I'm doing very well. I'm also, I've been here for 5, 6, 7 years, and my salary continues to increase because of the good work that I'm doing. And I haven't even maxed out yet in my pay group, which is great. So B here would be the primary reason why an employer would even establish a pay range. So I'll pause there to see if anybody has any questions why B is the correct answer for this particular question. Veronica says it makes sense. Good, good. Jessica says, yep, pick too quickly. That happens. Trust me. So again, it really, and I know I feel like I've said this a million times, but slow it down, read your answers, justify it. Because these types of questions is where all of them are right. But we want the best right. We want the best of the best. As to the reason why, for this example here, an employer would use a pay range. Yeah, Sarah, I like that. You have to really look at the big picture, right? Broaden it out. Because I think C should be the answer, the correct answer, quite honestly, because when you ask me, well, what are you looking for in compensation? I'm going to give you a dollar amount that I think it, makes up, well, one, my experience, my skill set, and of course, that is going to take care of my needs, right? I have bills to pay just like the next person. And if you can't meet those needs, then I need to find an employer that can. But that's not the reason why an employer, or I should say, that's not the primary reason an employer would establish a pay rate. So talking about inflation, right? Going from my 23 to my 24 book, with the the wages here, and there may come a time when we need to make adjustments for inflation. So just like we saw those red circle rates, right? Again, that should raise some flags in the organization to challenge, when's the last time have we done a salary survey? Because one, red circle rate, okay, maybe that was a oops someone had, where maybe they, got it approved, but they shouldn't have. Now, if you have multiple people with red circle rates, that needs some investigation work done. That someone needs to do a market survey, an industry survey, something to help determine why we have all of these red circle rates all of a sudden. Um, because as the market changes, right, you're going to get new hires that come into the organization and they're going to start asking for what, is competitive during that time frame. And your leadership may say, "Yep, I approve for that salary." But what does that do to your wage curve? It's going to throw it completely off if someone doesn't adjust it. So sometimes we do have to adjust for inflation. That does come with two different methods. You can either do a fixed rate method or you can do a percentage increase method. So the fixed rate obviously is in its term, it's fixed. You get X, amount of dollars or cents to bring you up to where you need to be in the market. A percentage increase would just be a percent. Again, kind of going back to the term itself. So now we're not talking about a dollar amount, we're talking about a percent amount. Well, I'm going to make a salary adjustment in the amount of 5%, right? So you get a 5% increase over the compensation that you are being paid. Interestingly enough, in my previous role with my previous employer, I was adjusted 3 times. I had a percentage increase 3 different times in my 6 years of working for that employer. So one, I was thankful that someone on the comp team was doing their job, making salary adjustments along the way. Two, it was a little concerning that they had to adjust my wage 3 different times because I was, and I would say I was being paid below the mid line or the trend line. And so they had to adjust me 3 different times to just get me where I should be with my peers. Needless to say, there were some equity issues with my former employer that created some of this conversation that resulted in adjustments for inflation. So that's again, there's 2 ways to do that. Again, you get your fixed rate, dollar amount, percentage rate, which would just be a percent, whatever that looks like.
What about soccer?
Here we have the individual pay rate determination. So how do we differentiate, right? Is what this slide is sharing, is how do we delineate who gets what within our company. So these is talking about the impacts on individual pay. And if I had to ask you all, like, what would be some delineating factors as to the reason why, my onboarding specialists, and I have 6 of them. So I have 6 onboarding specialists, and each one of them are paid differently. I'd say, or you'd say, it's based off of performance, right? They've been with me a couple years now. So their merit increase looks a little different. I have some 5 stars and I have some 3-star onboarding specialists. So performance, you probably would say that right out the gate, right? So that is how we can probably immediately differentiate who gets paid what within a company. A second thing that you probably throw out would be experience, right? Everyone comes in as different experience levels. Some of them come in with a year of experience. Some of them may come in with 3 years of experience. Some of them come in with a certification. So we take that into account, right? So that is going to have some delineating impacts on compensation. Seniority, especially if you're in a union environment, right? So, of course, the people that's been there the longest is going to get paid more based off of the role that they have within a union. The potential. I always say we do not hire for today. We hire for the future. We hire for the potential of this person. So, salary could look different there. And then just some other differentials, geolocation would come into play as well. So again, I would say geolocation, cost of living adjustments, Would be some differentials that would help us to determine what that individual pay rate should look like. All right, so this slide here speaks to our salary compression and inversion, which is happening today. And it happens a lot in organizations where both of these terms are very, very similar. So on your exam, it's going to be very important that you have an understanding of what salary compression is as opposed to salary inversion, because they are so closely related. Salary compression can actually lead to salary inversion. But salary compression is when you go to hire someone and they are coming in at a very, very close rate to your highest paid employee. So take my onboarding specialist, for example. I just hired someone back in April, and that person was brought in very, very close to my most tenured onboarding specialist that I have. And I was like, we're going to have to watch out for that, because when it comes time to do merit increases next year, that person could surpass my most tenured employee that has the highest compensation right now. When we get to that point, and if that my April hire surpasses my most tenured person, then that would lead to a salary inversion. So right now it's inverted. Stephen, I welcome the pets. Thankfully, my doodles back here are actually being quiet for once. So not a problem, but just honing in again, making sure you all have a good understanding. Salary compression comes first. That salary inversion would be the effect of the salary compression. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, Veronica. And unfortunately, a lot of companies are dealing with this. Where, I mean, gosh, I mean, if you had somebody that was, let's talk about salary compression, my onboarding specialist, for example. Like I said, I've been at Grant Thornton for almost 2 years. My most senior person has been in an onboarding specialist role for 5 years. So they are my top person when it comes to comp and experience. Like I said, I just hired someone back in April, and what they asked for a salary, and we negotiated to a salary. And again, it's just a couple of $1,000s lower than my most senior person. So right now we're dealing with a salary compression. Now, my April person did not get a merit increase this year because they just started. So they will get a merit increase next year in the July timeframe. So, with that being said, the conversation that I will have with the calibration team is I will need to closely monitor my 5 year person that's been as an onboarding specialist versus now my 1 year person that just started again this past April. Because if he surpasses my 5 year person, that is when we get to a salary inversion issue. Now, the person with the least amount of tenuredness is actually getting paid more than the most tenured person on my team. So it is a big issue. One of the ways to combat this is to do your market salary surveys. Another thing to do here is to challenge the comp budget. And I'm sure your comp team, if they are noticing this, then they should be challenging the leadership team who is responsible for the budget making to ask for a bigger budget, because you are going to eventually have your top performers, they're going to leave, because once they get wind of people that are working in your company with less amount of tenuredness and possibly less amount of experience, they're going to leave. What I do know, Veronica, interesting, with my former employer, and this is something that they practice. I will say that they practice. They will leave. They will leave the company. They will put in their 2 week notice. They may have a job lined up, they may not. And they will wait 6 months and they will reapply for a position at the company. We know turnover happens. They apply for a role that they can do and they ask for more money. And they get it because now they are seen as an external hire versus an internal employee that is simply just going through the merit increase route. I saw it happen so many times with my former employer. And once I learned about it, then people were starting to share, like, oh, yeah, like if you want more money, you will have to leave and come back. Um, and I was like, wow, that's how you overcome really the salary inversion. It is a very tricky process or practice, I would say. Elizabeth says it could be challenging because what happens if your new hire has an important HR experience outside your company? No, it really is a rock and a hard place. Again, here, as it relates to your exam, how would you combat this? Well, you need to think about the budget. Yes, you need to think about how does this look for your internal, your top talent? How does this look for retention? Jessica, 100% agree with the culture, especially if you're referring to the example that I gave with my former employer. Like you literally would have to leave. You have to leave the company and then come back. And when you came back, they were happy to give you more money, but not while you were an internal employee, which is really sad. As we close out today, we cannot not think about our expatriate allowances, right? We haven't talked about these folks in a little bit, but we want to think about them as well as it relates to their salary. This could also paint a picture of some red circle rates. But this is temporary. So while it would create some red circle rates, we know that there is going to be a recourse at the end of the expect. But typically salaries could increase 2 to 3 times in expatriates base salary. So these are just some of the call outs that you take into consideration when someone is going on an assignment. So we have education, spouse, travel, the cost of living, housing differential, a different pay system, things of that nature when it comes to expatriate allowances. But just knowing that again, this is going to inflate their salary at least for the duration of their assignment, and then once they get repatriated, their salary would reduce. Just going to throw this out here, but pay decisions, like I said, 2 basic processes. We're talking about the rate structure, so that salary curve in the budgeting process, right? So like I said, we need salary compression inversion. We really need to go back to the budgeting process. How do we budget? What does that look like, right? We talked about this in Unit 1. Are we looking at it from a zero-based budgeting perspective? What do our contingent workers look like on payroll? That variable pay can also add up into someone's salary as well. And then also we talked about the pay secrecy versus open pay policies. Again, you want to talk about a toxic culture? Well, gosh, it would just be a shame that we are all open to pay policies and we all just start discussing our pay. If my 5-year person shares with my person that just started in April and they start talking about salaries, that's going to be a difficult conversation to have, for sure. So, we need to, I would say, really budget and think about and challenge our leaders on what that wage structure is supposed to look like. Because we're not going to stop hiring people, and new hires aren't going to stop asking for more money. How do we combat that? All right, so as we roll out tonight, which of these statements regarding individual pay determination is false? So which one is untrue? And the formatting is off, so I apologize. I just noticed that. All right. Well, the answers are coming in. I won't hold you all any longer. I just looked at the time as well. Um, so C is here is the correct answer. So which one of these is false? So pay rates for new employees should reflect their current abilities, but disregard their future potential. When again, not true, right? We want to be able pay should reflect their current abilities, but also take into account their future potential. So we want to be able to pay them what their skill set is today, but knowing that we're going to grow and develop them. And gosh, we want them to stick around for a little bit if they're going to be a top performer. So we want to take into account their future potential as well, or as well. So that one is false because of the disregard here. So if it said and take their future into account, then it would make it true, but it doesn't. So C here is the correct answer. I actually do not like true or false questions. Not a fan. All right, so as we roll out tonight, economic factors affecting compensation is a self-paced module in the Hive. Now, with that being said, I know some of you all reached out to me and said you can't get into the Hive or you can't take the mid-study survey so you can get to the rest of the lessons. So what I'm going to do is team up with Jan to see why that might be impacting you all's ability to take the survey. I apologize for that. One thing you may want to do is clear your cache. I feel like I'm IT now, or sounding like IT. Clear your cache. Try to use a different web browser if that helps. I'm going to see if I can just get an external link as well, because I know the link that is embedded into the Hive it wants to take you to the Hive to complete it. But if I can get an external link, I'll share that as well. But just know that I am running this up to Jen for escalation. Let me see here. Oops, let me get out of here. I think, give me just a second. If you all want to hang tight, I can screen share. And let me get in here. Right. So here we go. So I'm in our Hive. And so in here it is. So under lesson 16, you have this mid-study survey, but what some of you all have shared in feedback is that you're not able to see this screen. So for me, I'm in Chrome right now and it pops up just fine. But I do realize that sometimes Edge may or may not work. Like I said, you might want to clear your cache and your cookies. Sometimes even going into this in incognito mode actually helps as well. It is called the mid-study survey. So you may want to play around with it. Like I said, incognito mode may help as well. But like I said, I'll run this up the chain to just to let Jen know that this is an issue in getting to our Unit 4 sections. So let me go back to 18. Oh, sorry. Yes, 18. And so in 18 is where your self-paced module is. So that is the next section that we would be getting into for Monday. So that is in here. It's a really short section. I could actually probably cover it just fine on Monday if you're not able to take the self-paced module because you're not able to advance forward. But like I said, I will share this with Jen as well. All right. Any other questions related to the survey or the hive or anything? Okay.
I have a quick question. Sorry to come off mute. The boot camp that we have going on tomorrow, this is
Yes.
Taisha. I just want to make sure, are those included as part of our program that we paid for?
Yes.
Okay,
So
just
your
wanted to
boot
make sure.
camp, let me find it. Where is it? Under tutorials. So your boot camp one, oh, and thank you for saying something about that. I wanted to put a plug in because this is the first one. You'll have a unit 1, a unit 2, and a unit 5 boot camp. And I think these are just very good. It helps with the recall. And if you're not able to attend tomorrow, it will be recorded so you can listen to the playback. But yes, so it is at the top of the Hive underneath bonus tutorials and review sessions. It is included in the 16-week course. You'll just want to make sure that you register for it.
Thank you so much. I wanted to make sure that I'm able to like refresh through my lunches and that it was present. And thanks for reminding us.
Yes, yes, no, not a problem at all. And like I said, if you're not able to attend live, trust there will be a recording. All right. Yeah, let's see. Okay, Anna, you'll listen to the recording. Awesome. All right. Well, if there's not any additional questions, I will let you all go for the evening. Anna, if you have any additional questions, I can hang out if you need me. But if not, everyone have a wonderful evening, and I will catch up with you all again next week. Thank you. Yeah, I'm about to go make my medicine ball like Jasmine recommended.
I do have questions. Sorry, I came on mute.
Let me see here. Give me just a second. What am I doing?